Hi, my name's John Cordy, and this is a guitar I built. All I want for Christmas, by the way, is to get rid of that fairly pungent smell coming from that area of the garden. I think the neighbours are starting to notice. So, I wanted to just talk briefly about this guitar. I've been in the process of making another guitar. It's sort of raised the question in my mind about whether it's worth doing, so I just wanted to talk openly and honestly about the process. Basically, I build occasionally parts casters. This was the very first one that I built and happens to be my favourite one. The places where you can get some of these parts, I think eBay's a good place to look for body parts and neck. The neck here was a Mighty Mite neck. I don't know if they still make necks, probably, I'm guessing. The body was from a place called Boo Boo Guitars on eBay, and basically it's an offcut, as there's like a tiny little imperfection on the back of it, but it's a swamp ash body, obviously a rosewood neck, the maple back. I'll just show you some photos of the process of finishing the body roughly like this, with one that I'm doing but that I haven't found the motivation to finish off as yet. But you'd tell me in the comments whether I should bother to do it once you've kind of watched the video and seen my assessment. First of all, I think the process of doing it is can be a bit therapeutic. You know, I don't know if as a kid I built occasional, I think I might have built one even, an Airfix model, and it's kind of got that feeling to it. It's like you're working on a project and it's quite exciting because at the end of it there's going to be a guitar for you to play. That's kind of the fun side of things. The other side of things is that you can end up building a guitar that plays better than you'd expected, and it ends up, if it does compete with a really good guitar, it ends up being quite a cheap way to build a really good guitar as you want it. So for instance, this guitar is kind of my favourite Telecaster, probably. It's got a slimmer neck than I would have chosen now, but I think for that reason it plays exactly how I want it to play, and it's a bit of a strange thing really, because every time I pick it up now I think, that's really good, and it's sort of like a happy accident, to be honest. So that's kind of one of the key things. You don't really know what you're going to end up with. Obviously most of the guitars that we buy off the shelf or off people are made by people that make guitars, I'm guessing, day in, day out. So even if it's like a Squire that's been built at a factory, or, you know, one of these lower end guitars, I'm guessing that each day the people that put their hands on that guitar are putting their hands on guitars all day long, if that makes sense. Just looking at the numbers, I'm going to guess that they have better ways of doing certain things than I can do. So it's like a sort of a trial and error thing. And so I've done 4 guitars, I think. This one's my favourite one of the lot. None of them are particularly bad or are bad at all, and all of them I enjoy and I could play if I choose to over my other guitars. But it's just that thing, you don't really know what you're going to get at the end of it. I guess a way around that would be you could find someone locally who's a luthier or does setups and stuff, and take that guitar to them once you've assembled it and done the best that you can. If you find that it's still not jiving properly, you could take it to someone, and I'm pretty sure, since it's a guitar, and if it's something simple like a Telecaster, I'm guessing they're going to be able to make it play a lot better, even if it is seeming like a bit of a dud. The only real downside I can think of kind of building your own guitar is that it takes quite a bit of time. Obviously I'm not CNCing parts or, you know, building everything from hand, but just like finishing a body, for instance, if you're going to use nitro, takes a matter of weeks. It's something that's going to take up a bit of time, and that's something that I'm finding at the moment with the one that I've kind of started and got underway, but I've sort of lost a bit of motivation because I could just be playing some of my other guitars rather than building one. So there is that. Then the other thing is, if you end up, I think there's a few kind of part places like MJT, do they sell bodies, and they're not cheap, and you could end up putting together a guitar that probably costs roughly like £1,000, and on the used market, realistically, you're unlikely, I feel, to get the kind of money that you might sink into one of these kind of guitars. If you look on eBay and stuff and look for parts casters, there's quite a few out there, and that might also be a way to source some parts for this. Someone who's tried to build a parts caster, you could find someone who's used some decent pickups in there, even if the neck and the body don't end up being something that you want to use. Yeah, you could probably get a bargain or two in that way. So you could end up sinking a lot of money into what you feel is like your ideal project. You might buy a warm-off neck and a warm-off body or whatever, and then you're kind of in that second-hand used Fender-y kind of territory, and then it might just make more sense to go and buy a Fender, American Vintage reissue, if you can get a good price on one of those used, and at least then you could probably sell it again for exactly what you paid for it, and you've not taken on that risk. But I guess part of the reason for building a guitar is to see if you can do it in the first place. The other thing is, I think it can kind of teach you what goes into making a guitar and help to sort of demystify some of it, but in other ways it doesn't really demystify it, because at the end you might end up with a guitar that's magical or one that's not. For me, I found it a bit addictive, and that's why I ended up building a few more of them. But I would say that potentially now I've got some guitars in my bedroom that don't get played that much. If they were easy to sell on again, possibly by now I might have done. But because they're parts casters that I've built, I don't know that they'd necessarily be worth much. So there's like a sentimental attachment to them rather than something that I really want to go and play every day. So those are kind of my thoughts on this, weighing up whether you should try this or not. I kind of think it's definitely fun to do one, and if you are a guitar player who's obsessed with guitars, I think it definitely makes sense to do at least one of these in your lifetime if you can. In this guitar I've got K-line pickups. I think I spec'd the neck pickup to be something like a Strat pickup. You can see it started to wear. The neck wear is artificial, obviously, but this was kind of the way that I wanted it to go, like a rustic looking thing. I think also if you're trying to make something that looks super pristine, you're going to have to be a kind of person that's very patient with this sort of thing and potentially put a lot of time and care into it, whereas I chose to go for a more rustic design because I know that I can't particularly finish a thing off that nicely. It's grain filled black. I think it's called Gecko fill or something like that, grain filler, and then that's sanded back kind of scrappily, and then with this particular one I stained it white with white pigment, and then Danish oil is the finish over that, sort of oil based finish I think it is, isn't it? And then the other body that I've shown you in some of the pictures that I'm still working on maybe is the same process, but I've gone over it with opaque white nitro instead of the oil based finish. So let me know in the comments, do you think I should try and finish that guitar off? I think I've got all the parts except for the electronic. Would it be interesting? And that's the real fun of the whole thing. So yeah, that's the story of this guitar. So that's the story of my Telecaster. Presets that you heard me using at the start was the Prince preset for the HX Stomp, which will also work on Helix. You can grab that in the description if you want. Cheers.